Hi, welcome to Discussing Fitchburg Now. I'm your host, Sam Squalia, and the theme of tonight's show is the current state of our energy system in Fitchburg, lowering the costs of our energy now and into the future, and potential strategies for that. So we're going to discuss the Muni Choice legislation, what the Muni Choice bill is, what it would do for Fitchburg, Unitil and their role in our energy distribution system, how they are relating to us, what they're doing to improve their infrastructure for the future, bringing us to solar photovoltaic systems. With more and more solar systems being approved and installed every month, how does Unitil plan to improve the infrastructure to increase as we go along? And on to solar installations, how do they work and how can they lower our cost of energy? So tonight's panel of guests includes State Representative Steve DiNatale. He's the lead sponsor of the petition to the Massachusetts legislature for regulating the establishment of municipal lighting plants, known as the Muni Choice Bill. And we have Alec O'Mara.
I like the bald one, yeah.
He is the media relations manager for Unitil, Fitchburg's investor-owned electrical generation and supply company. And then we have Nate Vignola. He's the CEO of NV Energy LLC Solar.
Correct.
He runs a solar PV consulting and installation firm in Leominster. And then later on in the segment, we'll have Carolyn McCarthy of the Lunenburg Utility Task Force. So we're going to start with a quick background on our electricity distributor, the Fitchburg Gas and Electric Company, DBA Unitil. So Fitchburg Gas and Electric Company, organized in 1852 to illuminate gas streetlights in downtown Fitchburg, Massachusetts. And it was purchased by Unitil in 1992. Now Fitchburg Gas and Electric provides retail, electric, and national gas distribution service in a 170 square mile service area to Fitchburg, Townsend, Lunenburg, Ashby, Westminster, and Gardner. So, in our community, Unitil, an investor-owned utility company, is essentially a monopoly. They own all the infrastructure. They provide all the electricity to our grid. So the problem we often hear with the cost of electricity, right? We hear complaints about service outages. Many remember the ice storm in 2008 when power was out for 10 days. Do we have images? Okay, so in our Discussing Fitchburg Now group on Facebook, I requested a few bills from both National Grid and Unitil customers, including my own Unitil bill. Okay, let's see if we can cut to the pictures of the bills. Behind this, we got some bills. Okay, well, anyway, I analyzed a few bills from people that submitted their bills from Unitil and National Grid. And we went over, so just did a quick calculation with a few bills. And you can see that with the image brought up. There we go. You can see that Unitil, even the lowest residential one comparison, it's 23% higher rate than National Grid, which is also an investor-owned utility, but a much larger one. So the problem with the monopoly could be a lack of competition. That's the argument. So when our laws were written in Massachusetts, they never anticipated the sort of energy growth that we currently have today. So our laws kind of foster that monopoly and do not allow competition for energy suppliers. And that's where one solution that our lead sponsor of the petition for the Muni Choice Bill, Steve Needham-Talley, has been arguing for. So, can you tell us about the Muni Choice Bill?
The bill's been filed for a number of years. Prior to my filing it, it's been the lead sponsor has been Jay Kaufman, who's the representative from Lexington. So about for the last 9 or 10 years, he was the lead sponsor. He handed it off to me about 4 years ago, so I become the lead sponsor as well. So, and it's basically just what it says. It's a municipal choice bill. It provides, if it's passed, it provides a community with an option to take over the utility, in this case Unitil, and provide their own electricity to the ratepayers in that community.
Because right now the problem exists. Why can't we just take over? Why
Right.
can't we just buy Unitil out right now?
Well, first of all, the legislation that exists today has an opt-out provision that Unitil can simply say, we're not interested. The Muni Choice Bill would eliminate that opt-out option, that they can't refuse to sell if in fact the amount will be determined by the Department of Public Utilities and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So
they would determine the fair market rate
right.
that
Yeah.
Unitil would then have to sell to us.
Yeah.
But regardless, even if we propose to them to buy them out now, that would be the same fair market rate?
yeah, sure. And that would be determined by DPU.
By DPU?
Yeah.
So Unitil couldn't say, I want
Oh,
twice that.
The issue is
They could either just say no,
yeah,
or
right, and it would be
yes.
significant. I mean, you're purchasing their infrastructure, the wires and the pipes and all that stuff.
What's the approximate
Right.
value?
I do not know that off the top of my head. But we're talking about a large amount of land in all 4 of the towns that we
Yeah.
serve here in Massachusetts. I believe my understanding of the existing law is that if a community wanted to buy the electric assets in it, it would be like a normal 2 people wanting to buy something
Yeah.
situation where
Yeah.
you would discuss the price, you would negotiate, so on and so forth. And the new legislation, it's effectively more like an eminent domain, where the
Yeah.
state could then basically say, this is what we believe the price of these assets are, and then the state would have the choice as to whether or not they would want to buy them at that value. Is that basically in a nutshell?
And it would require a 2 consecutive votes by the voting public.
Okay.
That they're agreeing to do this.
So it would be
it's
put
not
on the
something
ballot.
right. It's not something that people would go into with their eyes closed over it. So
That's
and
if-
I know the legislature's concern, leadership in particular, is that a community would take on more than they can in debt and so forth. Because again, it would be substantial. But I think the driving force, as far as I'm concerned, is the option should be there. Right now, there is none.
Right.
There should be an option. It should be up to the ratepayers in the city, or in this case, the voters, and whether or not they want to incur that kind of a cost, and having to determine what that cost would be. As I said, it's probably going to be significant. I have no idea what it would be, but it would be in several hundreds of millions of dollars.
The land
I'm sure.
alone would be quite a bit, and then
So-
you have all the infrastructure on the
But
land.
again, having that option is, I think, is the key. And who knows? Maybe the public, because, you'll forgive me, Alec, but the opinion of Unitil has never been good, and it certainly hasn't been good since '08. And as a result of the '08 ice storm, the legislature, particularly the delegation here, myself, with a couple of the bills, has tightened up the way the investor-owned utilities respond to weather events. And in all
Separate
honesty,
from the Muni Choice Bill.
Muni Bill, right. They have done a great job in terms of setting up, what's the unit you guys have, when there's a weather event? The
Our
emergency-
Incident Command Center.
Incident Command Center,
Yes.
right down on John Fitch. They do a great job at that. Rich Francasio kept coming on, was the best thing you guys ever did.
He's a great guy.
And he's done a terrific job. But again,
So,
I just go back.
establishing the incident
Yeah.
response.
And that was a result of '08, because there were some deficiencies there that we wanted to tighten up, and we did. So
So how did you get that going with Unitil?
Well, I think the findings after we reviewed what happened during the ice storm.
The response.
They knew that that was something that needed attention, and they addressed it. So to their credit, it's working much better than it used to prior to '08.
Well, there's been a number of storms since.
Yeah.
There was Irene, the October snowstorm,
Yeah.
Sandy. We've been at or near the front of the pack on each one of those events. We've been getting calls regularly from the governor now congratulating us. We got those on those storms. So we take emergency response extremely seriously.
Yeah.
We have meetings with you regularly.
Yeah,
we have
that's
meetings
right.
with first responders regularly.
That's right.
We want to try and make sure everybody who's involved with us has the best information we can about how we're responding to these events. I was brought on specifically with a background in journalism to try and make sure that the best information possible is getting out to folks. That's what we do.
Now, Alec, if the company can do something about their rates, we'll enter into a love affair once again with Unitil, if there ever was one there.
Is there a love? I read back when Unitil. I had read back that in 1992, when Fitchburg Gas and Electric got bought from Unitil, that people were complaining about Fitchburg Gas and Electric rates,
I'm sure.
how high those rates were.
Yeah.
No.
And then when Unitil bought us out, it was that Unitil was a bigger company, and the rates would get lowered because that's what happens with bigger companies.
Oh, my folks are from Lunenburg, and they recall as much as, say, 50 years ago, folks talking about Fitchburg Gas and Electric. I don't think anyone ever, likes their utility, and I understand that. And we completely understand when folks are talking about rates. So let me talk for a minute a little bit about rates and how they get set and how we're regulated by the DPU, because I think that might be helpful for folks who are listening.
Sure, especially with the DPU meeting tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, that's correct.
At 7 o'clock at the Fitchburg Public Library?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. What we are highly regulated by the state. The Massachusetts Department of Utility basically regulates and monitors and set policy for utilities on basically everything we do. So when the rates get set, and there's a bunch of different parts to an electric bill. There's the supply piece, and then there's the distribution piece. I believe at the start of the show you referred to us as a supply utility. We're actually not a supply utility. We don't have supply and we don't generate electricity. What we are is distribution, which
You're
is
simply a distribution company.
That's correct, as are all utilities in the state.
As a result of the law passed in the 70s?
Mid-90s.
Mid-90s?
And it was the Divestiture Act, and it was literally to do exactly that. It was to, and so what we have to do is go out every 6 months, we get the market rate of electricity, and then whatever that market rate of electricity is becomes exactly what that supply part of the bill. So that changes every 6 months.
Is there any separate company that does supply its own? Doesn't Fitchburg have an energy supply? Is that not?
No, we don't own anything like that.
Where do we purchase our energy from?
We go out to bid every 6 months, and basically all the power plants in New England are all governed by what's called ISO New England, which is a body, it's a nonprofit body that basically makes sure all the power plants that are active are able to do what they say they're going to do, because electricity is something that has to be made right away and used right away. So what they do is they say, okay, power plant X, you say you can generate X megawatts of electricity, we're checking you out, you can definitely do that. They're the folks that if there's a problem at a power plant, they say, uh-oh, and they let everybody know, and they put out the press release that says there's not enough electricity today to meet demand, and they would say ask for the governors to get involved, people to curtail electricity. This has never happened in New England, but they're the people that prepare for that type of scenario. So what they do is they basically validate all the power plants in New England, and they make sure that they can generate electricity, and then they become people who we can bid for. So then we go out to bid, and then we get whatever the bid is, whatever the market rate of electricity is. As we're going out, we're getting that portfolio. And again,
so you're getting a bid for a certain amount, like a megawatt amount.
To meet our
per
load.
every 6 months.
And the state sets the portfolio that is. They say, make sure X amount is renewables, and make sure X amount is other things. And so you make sure, and then you make sure whatever that is, and then it's a fair rate that is basically whatever the market conditions set the rate. So everybody, all the different state utilities basically end up pretty close to one another each season regarding what that supply part of the bill is. So you go out, you get it, and then that becomes part of the bill. The Unitil part of the bill is what's called the distribution part. So you have that supply part, you have the distribution part, and then you have the alphabet soup part, which is everything else that goes into the rate. It's things involving the Green Communities Act, net metering, energy efficiency programs.
All the little hundredths of a cent.
Little things like that.
Generally match the other companies.
Well, to a degree. There's little pieces that you see in the bill, and then there's like reconciling factors, pieces that say if we're doing a better job promoting energy efficiency things, then you might see like a recovery mechanism that says, okay, look, they're doing successfully all of these rebates. We want to support that, so whatever that is, then there's like this reconciliation factor that also becomes part of that.
A transition charge?
A transition charge is that actually came off the bills in January, but that would be things that were like holdovers. Transition literally meaning pieces of the bill that used to be part of what a utility had to do, but then the state changed the regulation, so you're transitioning from one kind of policy to another. And in Unitil's case, there was a piece of that bill from that Divestiture Act in the 1990s, came off in January, lowered bills by about $12 a month at that time when it came off of the books.
Was that Pine Tree or?
Well, it's Pine Tree, but it's also like how mortgages get sold. So basically, Unitil was required to buy this long-term energy contract. And when we bought the long-term energy contract, then shortly after that, state law changes said you can't have long-term energy contracts.
I can only do this every 6 months.
So in other words, whatever that long-term energy contract is, by law, and we have to follow the law, it then pieces of it then have to stay on the books until that law comes off. So that contract then lives, and then whatever that contract is, we sell it. Then other people buy it because they want that energy contract, and it's like
pretty complicated.
It's super complicated, and it's fun to try and explain it to folks. Long story short, it was a transition rate. It came off in January, and it lowered bills by, like I said, about $12. I think that was the estimate. I actually think it came down to around 13 or
13
something.
it was.
Yeah,
that's right.
that's what it was. Anyway,
So
But you know what?
getting way away from the distribution piece.
Yeah,
though.
but your comment about supply and purchasing at 6-month intervals, and that's
Correct.
the state.
Yep.
That's one of the pieces that I propose we attack our investor-owned utility.
You have a problem with the 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months is and I think the legislature established that because they were concerned that to
skyrocketing
burden
energy
a
rates.
community with a long-term contract that they, that is higher than they would have paid. That's why they wanted to keep them short-lived. But I think we need to extend that.
What are we finding
A year,
with the 6
2
months?
years. Well, because I think the rates are better when you can extend when you can go into an extended contract like that.
Do you think that's the case?
Well, it goes both ways, like any contract. And everything I know about contracts, I know from pro sports. So take this for what it's worth. But usually, the advantage to a longer-term contract is you have greater level of stability. But then, if market conditions change after a period of time, then you can say you signed up for 2 years at this rate, and then something changes and the market rate comes way down, you're still on that 2-year deal. So that's the advantage of a shorter contract.
Right.
The flip side is what's happening right now, which is what Representative is talking about, where you have shorter contracts, but because of a pipeline capacity issue in New England, you've seen a little bit more volatile rates on the supply side. Last winter, supply rates went up quite a bit.
Yeah.
It was a very substantial news story, not just for Unitil, but throughout the entirety of New England. So people who may have locked into a longer contract maybe could have ridden out that 6-month period. But say in the middle of last winter, you signed into a 2-year contract. You could see the opposite of that effect taking place. So I think with contract length, you can see pros and cons on all sizes. One thing that any customer can do, and it's because the supply part is separate from the distribution part. There's something called third-party supply or competitive supply. The entire town of Lunenburg does this, I believe, where Lunenburg can go out and get their own bid for supply whenever they want, and they can sign however long of a contract that they want. Individual customers,
for supply.
Just for supply, exactly. Yeah. Individual homeowners can do the same thing. So, and we have always been a supporter of
like
this.
Clearview or Verde.
The flyers come in the mail.
Yeah.
I get them. Everybody gets them, and they say we can set your rate at this for a certain period of time. And one of the things they offer is they offer a variety of contract lengths. So if a customer wants to get into a longer contract, they have that option to do so. If they want to get a shorter contract, if they want their supply, they want to know all of it's coming from a renewable source. There's companies out there that'll offer that as well. So that supply part of the bill, there are a lot of options as far as what goes on for that.
And we have that in Fitchburg for Unitil on the supply side. We
Absolutely.
can choose to purchase 100%
Yeah.
of our supply electricity
Yes.
from renewable resources.
Absolutely, and we work with whoever folks pick, and you get the one bill. The bill still says Unitil. I once talked with some seniors. They thought if they did this, that meant that we wouldn't come and fix their power anymore, and that's absolutely not the case. We're still distribution utility. We're still going to be around helping folks out with that.
Because you purchase the supply energy, or we can choose, and you purchase it from someone that you choose at your 6-month intervals. So
The state-
as individually, we can also.
Yeah, the state
choose.
literally calls our rate, our supply rate, the default service rate. Default meaning customers can get their own rate if they so choose. They can be their own broker. We're effectively serving as a broker for customers on that option choice. And if you can get a better rate, we advise all of our customers all the time that explore your options, and if there's an option that works for you, you should absolutely take a look at that. So.
And it was looked at in Fitchburg with the city council.
Aggregation.
Aggregation is what it's called.
That's
Right,
what they
correct.
do in Lunenburg.
That's exactly what happens in Lunenburg, yes.
And do you know what happened with that? I
It
heard
was several
that
years ago, and the problem was that the savings wasn't significant enough, and it was a penny, I think.
Yeah,
And,
well, it's
But it would
it's-
have cost us.
I mean, I think it was the savings would have been literally a cent. So I'm not sure that the council felt it was, it was worthwhile to pursue. So it didn't go any further. I think it was a company out of Marlboro.
Colonial. I
Colonial,
think that's what
exactly.
it is. They're the
That's
folks
who it
that
was.
they're the
That's
folks
right.
that work with Lunenburg.
And
yeah.
that's who, as a matter of fact, my office brought them into the city
Sure.
to speak to the council. It went through some of the process, but apparently, again, the savings weren't impressive enough for them to pursue it. So it just kind of, I think it was given leave to withdraw. So.
And I think the cent, that's about usually, I think, what Lunenburg
Yeah.
comes in at,
Yeah,
something along
yeah.
those
I mean,
lines.
it's a savings, but we were hoping for a much more significant. My understanding is you can get a little more, much more today, I think, by going aggregation. I don't know.
Well, again, it's, each individual outlet has a different way of going about it.
Yeah.
They all have different things they can offer. Maybe they're offering different contract lengths. I can't speak for them. I'm not them. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So it's one of those that I think that it's just a good idea for any customer, if this is something they want to look at, see what's available. And, for some folks, maybe that cent is a big difference, and that's something that they want to look at.
And the positive thing is the customer can opt out at any time.
Absolutely.
Some people think, oh my God, I'm locked in for whatever.
Well,
you're not.
individually.
It's
Yeah.
important to
Right.
know, as whenever you sign any kind of contract, one of the things we do advise customers, make sure you know exactly what you're signing.
Yeah.
Make sure you know if there is any opt-out language in there. Are there any fees that if you break that off? Because you're entering in a contract at your own. So there's an element of buyer beware there.
Okay, we're going to take a little break and cut to a video, and then we're going to discuss more about the infrastructure side of our Unitil connection. Okay. All right. Can we bring out Carolyn?
Not interactive, though.
All right, we're back. We're talking to Representative Steve DiNatale, Alec O'Mara from Unitil, Nate Vignola, and now we have Carolyn Lucier.
Thank you.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
And so now we were talking about the supply side of our electricity, the Muni Choice Bill, and now I want to talk about the infrastructure, the distribution charges on our bill, because the supply seems to have a market. There seems to be multiple avenues that you can choose to purchase from different companies to lower our rate. But for us in Fitchburg, Townsend, Lunenburg, and Ashby, we have only Unitil to choose for our distribution. So how does that affect? Do you think that that perhaps this is why our our distribution rates are so high? Why are our distribution rates so high compared to, for example, National Grid?
Sure.
Which just a quick analysis showed it was 23% higher.
Sure. And they are higher. I wish there was a super simple explanation as to what that difference is. There's a bunch of pieces to it. It has to do with energy efficiency, how each utility might go about that. It has to do with the per capita usage of our customers versus what other customers might be. It has to do with the specific economics of one region as opposed to another region. There's a whole bunch of different pieces to how the electric rate gets set. As far as exactly what causes those discrepancies, I'm not sure what it is. I know it's a combination of all of those things. Here's what I do know. I know that our rate is heavily regulated by the Department of Public Utilities, and whenever our rate changes, the distribution piece, that specific piece that is Unitil, we have to go in for what's called a rate case. And
Which is what we're doing right now.
That's what we're doing right now, that's right. And what that means is we go to the DPU and we say, DPU, based on our operation costs right now, between the last year that we were in for a rate case and now, the costs of XYZ have changed. And we say to the DPU, they have changed by this much, and we think the rate needs to be this going forward. And then the DPU looks at that proposal, and they spend 10 months going through everything that we said. And they go through individual operating costs, they go through budget line items, they make sure everything in there is as we say it is.
And what you propose.
What we propose,
why we
need it, why we need to do this, why this pair of scissors costs X dollar more than it did 2 years ago, all that stuff. So we go through that process, and then at the end of that 10-month process, the DPU says, based on our review of Unitil's budget and everything they need to spend and the amount of electricity that's being used in the service territory, their budget should be this. And this is the amount of electricity being used in these 4 towns, so we have to divide this budget by this amount of electricity, and they set a rate of X cents per kilowatt hour. And that's the whole process. And we've gone through it, like I said, I've been with Unitil about 5 years now. I think there's been 2 rate cases, so add that up, it's about a 10-month process. Over 40% of the time I've been with Unitil, DPU has been looking at our rates.
And so when you propose to Unitil, when you propose to the DPU that they raise the rates, how often do they deny or do they cut?
Well, I'd say in each case, usually there's some element that comes out. I don't recall, I'd have to look at the press releases the DPU has put out on each case, but they're looking at it hard. So, it seems like there are pieces that come out each time. They're doing their job. They want to see if there's things that they say, okay, right here, you should tighten this. And so ultimately it comes out, I think the past 2 times, they've lowered it. Ultimately, that's the DPU's choice. They're making the final call about what the rate should be to provide fair and reliable service. And that's all we're looking to do. So when we go in for one of these rate cases, all we're doing is we say, this is what we need to be able to continue doing what we're doing. We have infrastructure projects out there right now. We feel like they're making...
I'd like to ask about specific your infrastructure spending. I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
Where is this infrastructure spending? We accept the fact that in 2008, there was an extraordinary weather event. And I know for a fact that you went to the DPU and asked for compensation for your losses because of that storm, which we saw in our rates. But I don't see the infrastructure improvements that would reduce our risk that another weather-related event would result in any better service, any better reliability.
Sure.
And like how much of the DPU budget is spent that you're proposing? How much do you have for infrastructure improvements?
Well, infrastructure improvements is what we do. So really, the reason we go out, what that operating budget is to maintain and update the infrastructure.
Okay, so what specific things have you done in our communities to improve infrastructure since 2008?
Sure. Over the last 5 years, we've tripled our tree trimming budget. We have
Tripled
spent
your what budget?
vegetation
Tree trimming.
vegetation managing budget.
Yep.
In fact, in 2013,
And that's the best way to spend money, is on tree trimming. Trees are just going to keep growing. We live in the Northeast. Trees are part of it. That's part of our environment. And if you look in some of the municipal electric, they've solved this problem by using Hendrix spacer cable, which that's a more expensive, but it's a more lasting solution.
Why don't you explain what a Hendrix cable is?
It's like a diamond-shaped configuration. There's 4 wires. The first
Oh,
wire
yeah. I used
is
It's a heavy metal cable that
Is
runs
a-
across the top.
steel, which
Yeah.
which is also from one of your neighbors in New Hampshire. I've seen it in Amherst.
sure, we have it on Mass Ave.
Right. So the top cable is steel, which can bear the weight of a tree. Everybody, can accept the fact that steel can support a load, but the properties of electricity need a different property, which is the ability to conduct the electricity through the lines, and those lines don't support load. So it's sort of like the top of the diamond is the sacrificial cable that a tree can fall on. It's not going to rip.
What's it called? That static line is what the top cable is called. It's called a static line. Literally, it's like a horizontal lightning rod. It's also very common in transmission lines. But as far as
And I see that all over the municipals that are in this region that also have trees and other issues as their answer instead of tree trimming.
Has that been proposed as a solution to cutting down outages?
Well, we do have spacer cable on our system. It's in specific locations. We use a variety of different cables throughout all of our service territory. Referring to one specific line as saying it is specifically better in all situations isn't necessarily applicable. It's a little bit like saying the driver hits the golf ball the longest, so I'm putting all drivers in my golf bag.
Okay, so using that as your premise,
Yes.
how much Hendrix spacer have you put in since 2008 as a percentage of
I don't
line?
know. I don't know the specific percentage of line, but it's not necessarily replacing this line with spacer cable necessarily represents an upgrade. Here are some examples of upgrades that we do. Some things we do is we add additional separators. Separators are things that additional fuse breakers. In other words, if an outage occurs in this location, had we not put that in, maybe 100 people would have lost power. But because we put something like that in.
Reliability improvements.
Exactly, reliability improvements. Tree trimming is actually a huge, huge value place to make improvements on system. One of the, we have a pilot program.
I just don't know if spending year after year trying to fight trees in the Northeast is a good way to spend money. And I'd like to know, who is it that inspects your improvements, your infrastructure improvements?
Sure.
Is it still the state attorney general?
Yes, the Attorney General is the customer advocate in any rate case. And if you look at their testimony, I wonder if it's public. I bet it is.
Do they inspect?
Do they inspect specifically,
No.
go out?
No,
I don't believe
that's
so.
part of the problem. What I've proposed, not just the Muni Choice Bill, but along with long-term contracts, the third factor, the third prong of my approach is exactly what you're talking about.
An auditing system?
Is a post-audit and oversight on what you're proposing those rate increases are going to be put toward, to take a look to ensure afterwards that those in fact have taken place.
Sure.
What is
I've
the
got a
auditing
bill-
system right now?
Well,
There is
actually,
none. I don't think there is one.
following the storm,
Exactly.
the DPU asked for a management audit of Unitil.
Yeah.
So that was a third-party audit that wanted to look at Unitil's practices in a holistic way, and they looked at things like staffing, how we do in infrastructure improvements, how is our budget built, all those types of things. The overall report basically said that what we're doing is prudent. So there was that third-party audit that looked at what we were doing, and we have the DPU, which looks at our budget every time, and they make sure the way that we're doing it, we're following the practices that the DPU outlines are appropriate practices. The DPU says you should trim trees X years. What we're doing is with this storm resiliency pilot, which we started in New Hampshire 2 years to make sure it made a difference before we brought it to Massachusetts. We're picking corridors where there are things, important things along that line that might help infrastructure, hospitals, schools, places that might keep a lot of folks on, or maybe a place where there's a shelter. And we go above and beyond. We go door to door talking to homeowners and say, listen, if we remove these trees, X, Y, Z, here, 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 we think it'll have an improvement.
I just don't think tree
infrastructure.
trimming is the answer. And
Sure.
I think Steve's really onto something, that there needs to be oversight.
That's right, absolutely.
Because I'm
real-
not
a
so
strict
sure,
oversight.
like strict oversight that not
Yeah.
only makes sure that you spend the money on the
Right.
things that you said, but
Right.
also make sure that the spending that you do makes sense.
I filed a bill that's in the House right now. This is born out of a New York State bill that says when you replace infrastructure, it must be a generation above what you're replacing it with.
What kind of
A higher
infrastructure
technology.
would be talking
More
about?
current.
Transformers, substations?
Because
Under spacer cable like we're talking about.
Some of the
Spacer
rap
cables?
on Unitil was during the 08 ice storm was your transformers were from the 50s. I mean, we're not even beginning to talk about loss of power.
That was the next point I wanted to make, is
right.
where's your incentive to be more efficient?
Right.
Your incentive to make sure line loss isn't in my bill.
Yeah.
Sure. Well,
And I need Steve's help as a consumer, as somebody who cares about this state very much and wants to make sure that there's viable industry that stays here and isn't run out of Massachusetts. Because if all you have to do is leak electricity and pass that cost onto the consumer and onto industry, that's part of why your rates are so high.
Actually,
And in Lunenburg, I'm not surprised that those lines are from the 1950s, or and that the transformers are from the 1950s.
Right.
I don't see visually what's changed very much since 2008, and that's why I question, where is this infrastructure spend?
That's where the post audit comes in. I
And we
mean, a
need
real
that.
serious
So
post audit oversight.
with municipal electric companies, it's often said that there's a higher rates of
Reliability.
Yep.
That's because their spend isn't on fighting tree growth. It's on replacing key parts of the infrastructure to accept the reality of what our environment is. And the third point I wanted to make, besides line loss, is to what this gentleman's probably advocating for. In Lunenburg right now, I don't remember what the number is exactly. I've heard 125,000, 250,000, 250, to upgrade our infrastructure so that we can have green energy.
oh, you're talking about the circuits in Lunenburg.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's up with that? I mean,
Sure.
that's like, if I wanted to hire this man today to put more electrical panels on my property, I have electrical panels. I was fortunate enough to get them in before you basically blocked the entire town from being able to have green energy.
So Lunenburg can't connect their solar panels with a net meter to the grid to Unitil.
2 circuits within Lunenburg, which I believe represents, I think it's around 2/3 of the town, something along those lines.
Certain areas.
Yeah, so this is what that is. This is a little more complex, but I want to try and explain it as best I can because I think it's very important. Before I do that, I also want to let you know, line loss, it's measured by the DPU. You
I know, I've seen the numbers.
We're very
Right.
comparable to the rest of the state. So just so you know, we understand that. So
Comparable for these 4 towns, or comparable for your whole infrastructure? I mean, maybe the infrastructure in New Hampshire is getting more spend than we are. I don't know where this money's going.
That's absolutely not true, and I can explain that as well. One of the things the DPU looks to do is they make sure that money raised in Massachusetts stays in Massachusetts. So that absolutely is not happening. That's something the state looks at.
Okay.
Now, to talk about the Lunenburg issue regarding solar, because I know this is an important issue. I know a lot of folks.
And it'll be affecting Fitchburg soon, we worry.
We're
Not-
okay.
yeah, we're fine right now. That's not a concern right now. So there's 2 things talked about when talked about net metering solar. There is the cap that is set by the state, and that cap is more of a policy decision.
That's more what the minimum that you have to take from renewables?
Maximum, it's a cap. It says, based on our service territory, you can have no more than X% of your load be solar net metering. And there's a couple reasons for that the state sets that with the DPU. One of it is overall reliability. The other part is cost sharing. The way that DPU sets things like this up is solar and net metering has no impact on the utility. Because when you get a net metering unit, if you're putting electricity back into the system, we're the poles and the wires. So that still has an effect on our system. We're not generating electricity. We have no stake in the generation side of things.
You still have to maintain as the backup as well.
Exactly.
Right,
yeah, it's not like you have net metering. If your net metering things goes down, we don't give you electricity.
People have to understand something. This is where you come in.
Right.
Whenever someone puts a solar array on their roof, if I don't have one, I'm covering the cost that Unitil is losing as a result of that. Am I not?
Well, losing. That's not it.
Right.
But
And that's why the state puts that cap on.
That is what the cap is for.
Because they still need the same amount of. You still need to have that same amount of backup reserve power to be able to purchase.
They're the backup.
The rate is set based on the amount of electricity used in the system.
And if you got you get 4 or 5 days of cloudy weather, you may have a problem. I think the way to go is battery storage, is it not? Isn't that the newest generation
Tesla
coming up?
has a very affordable
Tesla's
product.
doing that? That's
and
right.
believe me,
Yeah.
that's my next spend on this issue.
Sure.
It's trying
Becoming more affordable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
and also,
in
like,
larger
if there's an
capacity.
ice storm,
Right.
I don't want to be living like in rags covered in gasoline trying to just exist. I want to be able to like go to work and make money.
We don't want that.
No one wants
We don't want that.
rags covered in gasoline.
That was pretty terrible and very dangerous, by the way. I'm not leaving teenagers home with a generator.
No, generators.
Oh, wow.
Teenagers should not be left home with a generator. Absolutely not.
But you know, that's how it was for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions would be.
I wanted to get to the key part of that. Absolutely, go, sir.
Okay, so the state says now the cap is 6% across the board.
Yes.
6%. That's the new proposal, or is
That
that the
was signed.
It's passed
existing?
in the Senate. It's not
So
in the
it's
House.
not.
Okay, so
that
now-
isn't the past one yet, right?
Yeah.
Because it was
So-
4%,
That sounds more correct.
and now we're moving up to
pushing for
6%.
We were 3, wasn't it? Was it 3 megawatts?
Maybe originally, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
currently it's 4. So in the CMR 220, which governs
the law.
Yeah.
governs
Yeah,
the law.
the law.
There's a section there that says, and it really I think this applies to Lunenburg, it says if your system is less than 10 kilowatts, that system does not apply into the aggregate
That's correct.
of net metering.
And the issue that's happening in Lunenburg is not related to the cap. We are below our
Right.
cap in Lunenburg. We are still accepting solar in everywhere but these 2 circuits. The issue that's going on those 2 circuits is an engineering issue. It's not related to the policy issue at the cap level. Effectively, what has happened is we've gotten so much solar on those 2, working with folks interconnecting on those 2 circuits, that the electricity is starting to go backwards towards the substation. If you think of electric infrastructure as it was designed, you think of it as like a tree or a river, where you have the center point where the electricity comes in and it flows outwards. It goes on the transmission line, then it goes out to larger cables and out to individual neighborhoods, so on and so forth. And when it was designed as a one-way street. It was supposed to go out because that's what everybody thought, whenever it was done. So
It's a nice story.
yeah. So when you get to the individual circuits in the substation, what you have is so much electricity on there. If you think of it as like a dam, the water's coming up and now it's coming to about the same level. So because the electricity that's getting fed back into that system is now reaching that substation. So if we continue to have more electricity come on there, it could start backfeeding through that substation. That's unsafe. It could
Okay,
cause a
you need
large
to make
outage.
a system that can do push.
What are
pull
the plans
versus hit
for
push.
the infrastructure improvements
Right.
in order to allow Lunenburg to continue to connect?
Do you need a
The-
GoFundMe page?
That's an interesting idea. The issue, you joke, but here's the fundamental issue.
There's some people that want their investment to start returning something.
Sure.
The substation itself, we are regulated by the DPU as far as how upgrades involving net metering can be done. There's a very specific law, and the purpose of the law is this. It says that once you hit that backfeeding issue and you need this upgrade, it's an existing thing. It can be done. Think of it as a faucet. It allows release of the system. It's a one-time thing. Once it's on, more solar can come on. But the issue is the law states that people who do not have people who do not have solar should not be expected to pay for the upgrade that the solar people want. So in other words, if it's raised in the rates
I got you.
and there's net metering, effectively what we've done is the folks that don't have solar, because people who have net
Are
metering don't pay
subsidizing the people
are
with
subsidizing
solar.
the thing. So
But that's how it is today anyway with green energy credits. That happens anyway.
Exactly.
So what's the difference?
Well, the difference is the tariff has a specific solution.
Yeah.
The tariff says, once you get there, no problem. Next person on pays for it, which was conceived, I think, in some ways, expecting that the majority of these kinds of projects would be very, very large projects. But what you have is, there isn't a very, very large project. The next people in line are individual homeowners. And an individual homeowner who might be working with a solar company, they would say, okay, here's your project, but now this is happening and this is going to cost you X dollars more, and that makes the project unfeasible. We understand that.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is one of two things. You can either say, well, three things really. One, you wait until there's a whole bunch of customers that want to get on. And you say, okay, all of you are coming on now. You can split the cost of this upgrade. It'll only impact all of you, and it's still a reasonable thing to do. That's one. Two, find a large customer. See if there's a very large applicant that's out there that's willing to take that on. Ask all the other customers, okay, maybe this
So
person
it's
can move up
literally,
in line.
you're jingling the can asking for people to contribute to your infrastructure.
There's no plan for Unitil to make the necessary upgrades.
Right.
Because they want to pass their costs on to the entire.
No, let's be clear, we don't want to, okay? There is a
Okay,
tariff.
so then this $3 million or so that your CEO is taking, there's not enough room to maybe cut back on his salary a bit and do these improvements out of like concern for the environment?
I understand your point. We have to follow the regulations as they're outlined by the state.
So the Unitil can't make the upgrades themselves?
What we have to do is we have to follow the regulations as they're outlined by the state. We are heavily regulated.
So you need more electricity demand in order to be able to?
No, it's not. That's not the issue. The issue is there are tariffs that exist in the state that say this is how you handle net metering issues, and we're required to follow those.
So it's at a state level that we might need to address the Lunenburg problem?
Well, the state is looking at the issue holistically. There's a project called grid modernization, and it's talking about this on a macro level topic, okay? And one of the things it's looking at is that existing tariff that says, okay, this is the solution right now. Is that a good solution long term? Probably not. So then how do you find a bigger picture solution? Do you say, okay, should you create a rate that specifically addresses this sort of thing? Should utilities have a responsibility to pay for that upgrade, which means effectively it becomes part of the rates and people who might not get solar then end up paying for those projects? Is that the solution on the state level? Another thing that's...
So there's no immediate outlook on some date?
Oh, no, this is something that's being talked about right now. There is a report.
Actually, 1 second. Why is it being talked about now? I mean, net metering started in 2008.
Sure.
And it was 4% then. Okay, so why didn't Unitil look at their network and say, can we absorb 4%? You just said Lunenburg isn't at the cap.
Well, Lunenburg, the two circuits right there are not at their... Our service territory is where the cap is set. So what we have is
So the
two
170 square miles?
Well, yeah, our service territory, our 28,000 customers is where the cap is set specifically.
So it's not designated per any individual area. You could say any one individual area.
Right. So what you have is you have an area that exceeded the pace of the rest of our 4-state territory. So the cap specifically is
Doesn't
about our
apply.
load. But what happened is, and the cap really has nothing to do with this engineering issue. The engineering issue is literally about, wow, a whole bunch of solar happened right here, and it's starting to come backwards through the system. There's a policy completely separate from the cap that says when that happens, you do this. Now, grid modernization is trying to figure out what the solution to how do you make sure the system is ready for that. You had sent me something about meters earlier. It's talking about that
Smart
as well.
meters.
Smart meters, right. The idea of having meters that specifically look at consumption on a day-to-day basis and give folks extra information that helps them with that.
That's part of the new grid modernization?
That's part of it as well. And all the different utilities had to file a report and says, these are things that we'll look at. We conducted a survey. We asked customers what their focus is. And I don't think anyone at this table would be surprised what that focus is. They say, yes, these sound like amazing things. please don't have it impact rates, which, makes total sense to us. We get that. So our proposal, in a nutshell, what we want to do is we want to be facilitators for these types of projects. When someone wants solar, they're going to be plugging into our system. We want them to be able to use our wires, our poles, and we want to make sure that they're able to do that at a way that, say, isn't impacting their neighbors with higher rates. So that's one of the things that we're trying to,
Work with the
Well,
state.
we present that, and then what will happen is the DPU will go over our report, they'll go over Eversource's report, they'll go over National Grid's report, and they'll look at all of those, and they will propose something comprehensive for the entire state. Perhaps they'll say specific things for individual utilities that say, well, based on your service territory, this is what makes sense for you.
Yep.
Or based on what's going on over here, this is what makes sense.
So in Fitchburg, we're not really worrying about capacity for solar.
Oh,
'Cause I hear a lot. People are like, I'm going to get my solar before Unitil shuts us off, like they did in Lunenburg.
Oh, people say that.
Yes,
That's not.
I
that's
hear it
not-
all the time.
So you're
there's
saying
a
that
tremendous
all of
amount
your,
of confusion on
all
that.
of your circuits in
Fitchburg?
Fitchburg are more advanced than they are in Lunenburg?
No, I'm
Then
not
what-
saying
what
that.
are
There's
you
just
saying
much less
exactly?
solar?
I'm saying that there's less solar in Fitchburg than on those two circuits.
So at
in
what point
Lunenburg.
will we reach the circuit cap
Yeah, how
in
close are you?
Fitchburg?
Well, the way it works is when there's a circuit that starts getting close, we have to conduct a study to make sure things are getting close. We haven't really hit that threshold anywhere in Fitchburg, Townsend, or Ashby
When do you
yet.
anticipate reaching that threshold to study it?
It's one of the, I believe you get to something like within 15% or something like that. So once you get there, you have to say, okay, well, stop, let's see where we are. And if that's where we are, then we have to go to,
Do we know where we are now?
I don't know it off the top of my head, no, I'm sorry about that. But what I do know is we don't want to get there. This isn't something that it's not.
But we will get there eventually, right?
I think
We should hope
eventually.
so.
Because solar installations are trending upward and upward, isn't that right,
Very
Nate?
quickly.
You would know.
Very
We,
quickly.
we have been advising the state when this issue first happened. This is something that I think could happen on any circuit throughout the entire state. This isn't a policy issue. This is physics. This is electrical engineering. So this is something that very well could happen on any circuit in any state in the country as this. So this is a very important topic of how this specific issue needs to get addressed going forward to make solar continue to be viable.
With the modernization of
Right.
the grid system.
And the push-pull that he
Sure.
was talking about.
And the important thing I think that I want folks to understand is that we don't have a stance one way or the other on this. This is not something that impacts us as a business. The law is written that way. It doesn't. All we want to do is find ways to try and help folks out. And we recognize completely that there are folks that don't believe that. And we recognize, we do. No, we do. We
You get the
that.
skeptical phase.
Sure. Well, people. I mean, and some of the ads from some of the solar folks, and I'm sure it's not you. I am. Is that some folks say?
Some say they won't even work with Unitil.
Oh no.
Correct.
What I'm saying
There
is.
are quite a few. that
Yeah,
won't.
well, there's I don't know.
Unitil drags their
particular-
feet connecting to the.
Yeah, there's
Connecting- Just what I
rumors from
Yeah.
in the
Sure.
in the
Well, we want to hear about that. So if someone, if that's an issue, we want those folks to be calling customer service. We want to be able to take a look at that. So let's say that right up front. But the primary point is that there are advertisements out there that say you do this and it is hurting your utility. And so then when you have an issue like what's happening in Lunenburg, people say, oh, they don't like it.
Well, the
And-
reason why, and I'll just be really clear.
Yes, please.
Is because you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're saying we're spending money on infrastructure.
Yes.
And then you're saying our infrastructure isn't up to snuff. Which message am I supposed to take away?
Let me explain that. Infrastructure improvements are for reliability. They're for helping the grid
As
manage
is.
weather, prevent outages. The infrastructure improvement we're talking about regarding solar is a new issue, distributed generation, that has a specific law with the state of Massachusetts that we have to follow. So there's infrastructure improvements regarding reliability, animal guards, tree trimming, new poles, new wires, that sort of stuff. That's infrastructure improvement that's covered in a standard distribution rate case. And then you have the net metering issue, which needs a whole new policy that's being looked at by the state for grid modernization. Two separate issues, but two separate laws.
So segueing on to solar.
Yes.
Yeah.
what do you think about Fitchburg residents and going with solar?
I
How,
think
is that going to lower our energy costs?
in the end state, absolutely, it's going to create more competition. You know, I
How
think.
does it create more competition?
Well, it's going to make people realize where the energy is coming from, and they're going to say, you know, I want it from a renewable source. So as more renewable sources come online, just the power of the market is going to, you know, reduce the cost. You know,
The retail and wholesale rates are distinctively different.
Yes.
What you're providing to a consumer is they want to put that photovoltaic array on because they're getting it at the wholesale rate. Is that not the case?
no, they will receive electricity at a retail rate.
Okay.
At equal to
At
the
equal
rate
to.
that you pay. The
Well,
meter
that's
spins
on the way to you.
backwards.
I own my array outright, and I
Okay.
consume my electricity. I also get a green energy credit for my production,
Sure.
and I also sell to you my excess.
Now, what does that mean in dollars and cents for you?
I'm not honestly keeping
Yeah.
track of that,
Okay.
but I can tell you that the green energy credit has made the payback period on my array that I bought myself between 3 and 5 years.
So
So
short
it's very attractive.
And we have virtual net metering in Massachusetts, right? Where it will carry over at a retail rate for so many months as a
Yes,
credit?
if you
That's right.
if you overproduce, utility will give you a dollar value at that current rate on your meter.
Is that
And
what they talk about, the meter running backwards?
Right,
Is that
right, and that pretty much goes on
But then if,
forever.
let's say you use 1,000 kilowatt hours, you use 1,000, but you generate 1,300. That
Right.
300 extra will carry over to the next month.
Correct, and
Or the
the
next
idea
month.
when someone comes out and wants to install solar, you look at the utility bill and say, okay, what's it going to be for a year? Okay, let's say you're going to be 10 megawatts over a year. You're going to design a system that's going to generate that much over 365 days. You're going to overproduce in the summertime, and then you're going to take the credit in the winter. You know, there's a couple different parts of the revenue streams on that. You have your rate savings, and you have your SRECs. I'm assuming on
The
your
green energy credit.
right. You're on Rec 1 program
Yeah, I
or
use
Rec 2.
like Knollwood something.
Sure.
They sell my credits on the open market for
Right.
my green energy production,
Right.
and I get a check.
Right.
In addition to saving on my bill.
Right,
In
so-
addition to selling my excess.
Right. So you have your two revenue streams. There's a lot of companies out there that aim for a 7-year payback.
Yep.
A lot of people like 7-year payback. Most businesses.
So
yeah,
we
okay.
finding 7-year payback?
We find 7-year payback. One of the main reasons why I came into the market is, you know, that I have an engineering degree, I have a master's in business. I said, you know, that's too much money. That's way too much money leaving the state. I said, you know, there should be a better way to do this. So my company takes a little better look at it and said, you know, it shouldn't be 7 years. How about 4.5? Let's go there.
I love it.
You know,
It's possible.
no,
It's
So
possible to have
We've
a
only
payback.
got a minute left, so I want to go into the DPU meeting tomorrow. Can you tell us quickly why it's important, what we do, what we should do?
I can say that through the Secretary's office, who I know I served in the House with, Matt Beaton, the first hearing was held in August, in the middle of summer when people are on vacation. I was very upset by that. I called him, I said, look, we need to cancel that. It was too late to cancel it, that's why we rescheduled it for September.
So
And I
that's
thank
tomorrow
him-
night at 7
I thank him for
o'clock.
that because,
At the Fitchburg Public
Yeah.
Library.
right.
And this
That's
is
right.
What do we do? Do we go
specifically
and
to
we
advocate that the DPU hears?
Not grant the rate increase, which,
They never have
Alec,
not.
we know that waltz. It's a dance.
Yes.
All right. DPU will probably give you less than you've requested.
But
I'm not going to pick on you, Alec, but I mean, as a representative of the company, you know, they have a great deal of influence through lobbying. This is the reason why the Muni Choice Bill is not going anywhere.
Well,
Because
now-
Okay.
lobbyists,
We're-
lobbyists have convinced leadership that it's not something that they want, for obvious reasons. I know this.
Money in politics.
There you go.
Well, just to be very clear
Yeah.
on that point,
Yeah.
we are required by law to file a report that says these are bills that we've talked about.
All right, thank you.
What, are we out?
Yeah, we're done.